Hello, everyone, and welcome to a surprisingly large and incredibly well spread out room. So just a request which normally gets no response whatsoever. If anybody would like to move a little closer to the front, just to make it a little bit more intimate, then that would be great. Well done, you moved about 2 feet there. Excellent. I like that.
Tell them there's a prize.
So I'll give you a couple of minutes for people to take coats off and settle.
Oh, wow. They're bright. Hopefully you can see us because we now can't see
Told
you.
you.
And then we'll start. Well, I'll start now by telling you that I am Phil Broughton from CIPs, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, and I'm really, really pleased to be here. I'll start off by telling you that first thing this morning I was listening to our CEO broadcast to our global population of employees and tell us how much we'd changed over the last year. Our financial year finishes on the 31st of October, so we're coming to the end, and he was delighted to tell us how much we've grown and how much we've expanded and how many great things we've done through the year. And that kind of made me think about my time with CIPs, and I've been there 14 years. And 14 years ago, when I joined CIPs, we were the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply, which kind of alludes to a few people at the back of a finance office dealing with requisitions and shuffling paper around. But during that time, during my time at CIPs, 14 years, I have seen things change massively, not just the name above our door from purchasing to procurement, but what procurement and procurement people now have to cover and cope with and deal with. When you look at everything from diversity and inclusion, supplier diversity, you look at sustainability and everything that includes, you look at ethics and fraud and corruption in procurement, you look at social value, which we are doing today. Things have changed massively. And things have changed in a way that means that the people who work in procurement and carry procurement in their title have had to change as well. Growing capability, and we are a global organisation. I was saying that our CEO was broadcasting this morning, was broadcasting to our people right down in Australia and New Zealand, across the Americas, across Europe, Asia, the Middle East. And wherever we go, we try and support. Certainly we support through education, which is our remit, and training, growing people's capability, growing people's awareness and understanding, but also their ability to interact with not only their community, but as somebody alluded to this morning, influencing the CFO, influencing people within the organisation. And that's what our panel is going to cover today very much. I'm here to say what I've just said, but also to introduce the brains of the outfit from CIPs, Laura, who will be driving the panel and getting some really, really valuable information out of all these good people you can see here and on the screen, who will hopefully will give you some valuable takeaways to enable you to think a little bit more about how procurement can drive change, innovation, collaboration, and most importantly, tangible benefits to communities. So, I'm going to go and sit down there, out the way. If anybody wants to talk about CIPs, by the way, I'm around, so please come and have a word. But Laura, over to you.
Thank you very much, Phil. So our session is going to focus on delivering more social value through better procurement. So firstly, a little bit of audience participation and to raise the energy in the room after you've all had a cookie. So I've got a question for you all. So we've got this on Slido as well for anyone who is joining online. So we'd just like to understand a little bit more from you guys around your experience of delivering social value through procurement. So this could be as contracting authority, supplier, partner, those kind of areas. So these are your options, and I'll ask for the show of hands. So firstly, I'm experienced. I lead the social value strategy. I lead the delivery. Secondly, I'm involved. I support or I manage projects with social value requirements or delivery elements. My involvement's limited is your third option. So I'm aware of these social value activities, but my direct hands-on experience is quite limited. Or I'm completely new to this, I've got little or no experience, but I'm here to learn, I'm here to understand more, I'm here to ask questions. So just a quick show of hands, and I'll just get up this for my Slido. So who have I got who is experienced in the room? Super, I can see a little bit. Brilliant, that's quite a number of you, wonderful. So who's more involved? Great, I think slightly less. What about limited involvement? Great. Okay, we've got one brave soul over there. That's very good. Thank you for joining. And anyone who's brand new and here to learn? Super. A few more at the back. Lovely. Great. So a good mix in the room, but I'd say a lot more people who are here, who are experienced, who are leading this. So firstly, we're going to be asking you guys questions. So challenges, questions, or even examples of good practice that you're doing out there. Please speak up, please talk, because we are all here to learn and listen. Great. Right. So in terms of the session today, we've got a couple of minutes for everyone to do an introduction, and then I've got some specific questions that I'm going to target out to our wonderful panel, and then it is pretty much hand over to you guys. So do be thinking of some questions that you do want to ask, and as I say, we have got a Q&A on the Slido for anyone joining us online today as well. So I would like to introduce our experts. So firstly, I have Jen Pallister, who is a Head of Commercial Implementation at Cabinet Office. I have Mark Breakenridge, who is Business Development Manager at BIP Solutions. I have Priya Bahara, who's the Social Value Lead at Accenture. I've got Jo Gilroy, who's the Group Sustainability Director at Balfour Beatty. And Darren Knowd, who is a Chief Executive of DrKnowd Limited. Brilliant. Can I get a little whoop from my panel, please? Woo! Thank you. Get a little bit of energy in the room. Brilliant. So I am going to hand over to my panel. So everyone will have a couple of minutes, and if I know them very well, I know Darren's going to talk for a little bit longer than that, so he won't mind me interrupting when he goes off on a tangent slightly. So firstly, Jen, over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Jen Pallister. I'm Head of Commercial Implementation at the Cabinet Office. I joined the Cabinet Office last year, having been in local government for around 15 years before that. And my role is primarily around engaging with the wider public sector, from local authorities, utilities, universities, blue lights, etc., and engaging with them to help them implement and embed the Procurement Act within their organisations.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Jen. Mark, on to you.
Hi, I'm Mark Breakenridge. I'm a Business Development Manager at the Delta e-sourcing team at BIP Solutions. So I work with a number of public sector organisations who use Delta as their e-tendering or e-procurement platform. For those that don't know, Delta e-sourcing is an end-to-end e-procurement system that essentially allows buying organisations to manage their tenders, manage their contracts, and manage their suppliers.
Super. Welcome, Mark. Thank you very much. And Priya, on to you.
Yep, Priya Bahara. So I lead the social value practice at Accenture. It sits within our health and public services side of the business, and I work closely with all of our client account leads, which is primarily for central government, so not too much on the local government side, to develop our social value approach, so both from bidding all the way through to delivery. For those who haven't heard of Accenture, it's a global professional services company, and they're one of the strategic suppliers to UK government.
Fab. Thank you very much. Priya, Jo, on to you.
Hi, and I'm Jo Gilroy, so I'm the Group Director of Sustainability at Balfour Beatty. For those of you who don't know Balfour Beatty, we're a global construction business. We are the largest constructor in the UK for major infrastructure, and I lead the sustainability team across the UK, US, and Hong Kong. And within that team, we also have, it's quite a big team now, but as well as all the environmental elements, we have a team fully dedicated to the social impact space, which includes our responsible sourcing team, which are embedded in our group procurement activities, and then our social impact regional team that are based out on our projects across the UK as well.
Lovely. Thank you, Jo. Very hard hitters on this panel. And finally, Darren.
Hi everybody, my name's Darren Knowd. I'm CEO of my own company. We have 2 employees, one of which is me, the other one is my wife, and I'm second in charge. So my background, I do know a lot of people in the room already, as you might guess. So my background is 30 odd years of procurement experience, global private sector at General Motors in Liverpool and Nissan Europe. Globally, I then went into local government for about 17 years, where I was head of procurement, sales and business services. During that, I got extra hobbies. Another one of my bosses is in the front row, Tina, because I was chair of the Local Government Association National Advisory Group from 2020 to 23, and I launched the first ever conference here in 2017. So Tina kindly asked me to lead social value for local government for 7 years. So this is my 8th conference. So that's me, and I'll try and stick to a script. I did get a list of, this is what I'm allowed to say, and this is what I'm not allowed to say. So
the one I sent you. Brilliant. Right, and thank you very much, panel. Do really appreciate you being here today, and hopefully a real good mix for you guys to be able to ask questions too. So, Jen, as always, we start with the policy people. So I'm going to target my first question at you. Target's a bit aggressive, isn't it? I'll ask my first question to you. So, since the implementation of the Procurement Act, what differences are you seeing, and what are you seeing that started to be implemented? And if you can, could you provide some audience examples for us?
Sure. So I just noted from the poll there's different levels of experience and involvement in the social value piece. So I'll just do a little bit of scene setting first, if that's okay. Firstly, it's great to see so many people here from different sectors, different organisations coming together to talk about the importance of social value, and thank you for inviting me to be on the panel. In terms of a bit of policy background, so you may or may not be aware, the Procurement Act came into force in February this year, and that was brought about with the objectives to simplify public procurement, make it more flexible, and make it more accessible to SMEs, VCSEs, and new entrants. Alongside that, we have the National Procurement Policy Statement, and that sets out the strategic priorities for the Procurement Act and for public procurement, and how contracting authorities can support in the achievement of the government missions. The National Procurement Policy Statement is something that contracting authorities are mandated under the Procurement Act to have regard to. So it's a really important piece of, really important statement there for contracting authorities to be aware of. And what that statement does is positions procurement as a strategic enabler in achieving the government's missions, and really sets out the vision for how public procurement can drive growth, social value, innovation, etc. So contracting authorities have a real focus now on how their activities can achieve wider benefits. You may also be aware of the social value model, and that was something that was refreshed and updated earlier this year. There was a recognition that we needed to unburden processes as much as possible. So that model was streamlined, and we have a menu of social value outcomes which are approved and help to deliver on the government's missions as well. Skills, high quality jobs, opening up opportunities, breaking down barriers, etc. Things that I'm sure you're very well aware of. We do have a social value team who are engaging online with the sessions that have been going on this week. They engage with a social value network of around 150 members. They look at feedback from suppliers, best practice, and look at things like the co-design of supporting guidance to help contracting authorities. So we've had some really good feedback so far on that model and how it sort of landed. So hopefully that's quite a condensed overview, but sets the policy background. And 8 months on from the implementation of the Act, we are seeing a real wider awareness of how social value can be achieved through procurement, and how procurement can be a key enabler. In terms of what we're seeing so far, it is still quite early days. We have a number of contracts which have been let so far under the Act that are moving into the management stages now. But we have invested quite significantly in a capability programme across contracting authorities. That's things like e-learning, deep dives, and knowledge drops. So we've really promoted and encouraged awareness of the importance of things like social value. We have a Communities of Practice network, which has around 12,000 members currently. We have things like social value events at those Communities of Practice sessions, where contracting authorities can engage to share best practice, share any challenges, and really learn from the community as well. So probably going back to your question around what we've noticed so far, it is early days, but what we have seen is from the new central digital platform, which is the platform where contracting authorities now issue sort of transparency notices throughout the procurement lifecycle. We've seen a real increase in pre-tender notices, so market engagement, working early with suppliers to best understand individual markets and local need. We've seen sort of a more maturity in practice being developed and a more deeper understanding of how procurement can support those wider commitments. And we have seen some good examples and early examples as well, like I say, with the market engagement of where we're using the new competitive flexible procedure to drive outcomes. So we've got some examples from things like children's homes where we've got service users being involved in co-designing some of those requirements. That's really improving outcomes for children. Similarly, in the children and young people's field, where we've got competitive flexible procedure being used to allow things like site visits and more engagement with users at an early stage. So there's lots of benefits and we're seeing lots of engagement with the new flexibilities under the Act, which is really encouraging.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jen. I think your point on communities of practice and a lot more learning across the sector, across buyers, is really key, and it's good to hear that it is starting to drive some of that engagement. Darren, I'm going to throw to you if that's okay with that. So,
I was expecting.
Well, this is why I like keeping you on your toes, Darren. So, from what are you seeing from more of a local government engagement point of view, and obviously your role, kind of, if you like, as the go-between and the translator in that world? Where are you seeing this being applied the most?
Well, I think, Matt, before I answer the question, I'm involved with people like Officio, which is the largest procurement consultancy on the planet, who help central government, local government and health on procurements. I also work with Constellia, who's a neutral vendor of goods, works and services, and also a strategic advisor to BIP Solutions. So I'm coming, I guess, from different angles. I think it's a little bit too early to draw any conclusions about impact. I think the positive things I've seen so far, even though when I was with LGA, I grumbled about the transparency. I actually think the transparency is a good thing and will give us good information in due course. And I think when I last checked with information from Delta colleagues, we had something like 27,000 notices have been issued. Wow. The majority of that, arguably unsurprisingly, was preliminary market engagement notices. So there's been a significant step up in that early market engagement from the buy side to the supply side to an extent, and I was speaking at Procurement Live, I chaired 4 panels at Procurement Live last week and met a lot of colleagues and ex-colleagues, and they were saying, this preliminary market engagement is fantastic, by goodness I'm busy. So the communication, the ramp up has been quite significant, which I think is really helpful, augurs well for good outcomes, but I think sends a message that we need to make sure we've got the right resources in place in organisations to manage that. As well as I think the Cabinet Office have done a wonderful job with the learning, I still think the supply base are still getting their heads around it, and there needs to be more sector engagement, central government, local government, health, education and so on, with your own supply bases to educate people. Because in theory, we've gone from 7 procedures down to 3. We've got the competitive flexible procedure, which is wonderful, by the way. But that competitive flexible procedure, if you think about it, if we were all doing a competitive flexible procedure on a category of spend, we could all potentially do it in different ways with different stages and different steps and different evaluation criteria. So we've narrowed the number of procedures by number, but in application, I think it could be quite varied. So I think there needs to be a lot more engagement with the supply base, and obviously under the Act and also with the National Procurement Policy Statement, there are obligations on us to eliminate barriers with SMEs and VCSEs, etc. So I think that augurs well. I think the competitive flexible procedure is a game changer. And when I was in local government procurement as a full-time day job, I never felt the public contract regulations were a restriction. because the rules didn't say you can do this, but it also said you couldn't. So, but I do think now with the competitive flexible procedure, the gloves are off. You can do what you want as long as you're open, fair, transparent. So I think that augurs well for outcomes. I think the one thing I would encourage, and it's probably a little early yet, but hopefully we'll get to it, is in terms of stages, from my experience, particularly delivering social value, you do your engagement, you do the procurement, you get the commitments, you contract for it, you think you've done what's the right thing to do, but during that cycle, things can change, places can change. So having a stage for what I would call simply commercially contract optimization. So now we're about to actually go live and implement, is what we've agreed and what we've committed to and what we've contracted for the best possible outcome? And now that we've picked the winning bidder, can we do more engagement discussions based maybe even more concretely with local communities about what that community needs? Because probably the biggest lesson I've ever learned in procurement, every category of spend is different, every place is different, every project is different, every community is different, and you need to put work in to understand all that. But I think great legislation, great start. I think we're about where we thought we would be, but more work to do with the supply base.
Yeah, and I echo what you say in terms of that market engagement piece and that increase in the transparency. I think for any buyers in the room, engaging with suppliers was always a bit of an area of fear of understanding what you can and can't do. And I think opening that up and enabling it to be a lot earlier conversations, especially when we talk about local supply chains in SME market who need a lot more notice on projects coming up, it can only be something that's positive. Okay, so Mark, I'm moving on to you next because I'm messing with my panel. So I was listening to the conference yesterday and some of the suppliers were asking for more detail in terms of buyers being more prescriptive in what they're looking for. Yeah. So it'd be good to understand from your point of view, what are you seeing from a buyer and supplier perspective in terms of using e-tendering and using systems to drive social value, and that particularly how prescriptive are they being?
Yeah, so I think obviously like Jen touched on with the Procurement Act, it was such a major landscape shift for everyone, so it affected everybody within public sector procurement. Moving from perhaps a more complex and sometimes fragmented approach to a more simpler, transparent, flexible approach. And I think, obviously, with social value being embedded at the centre of that, I think it's fair to say in the past it's maybe been more on the outskirts or on the edges of the procurement, a nice addition, but not actually central to things. Whereas now it is, it's front and centre, and the Act essentially provides the public sector organisations to prioritise based on their specific requirements, whether it is employability, whether it is sustainability, inclusion, well-being. And then with the digital tools coming in, within my role, I obviously get the kind of privilege of speaking to so many people from the public sector, identifying their pain points, showing them the benefits that systems like Delta and any other digital tools out there can bring to help them modernise their procurement processes and increasingly embed social value within that. And I think we are starting to already see a positive change in that respect. Obviously, everybody's touched on so far the pre-market engagement through the notice, but also through soft market testings, meet the buyer days, supplier summits, things like that. And rather than just preset questions that we maybe seen in the past, it's genuine conversations that people are having now. And then that takes them obviously into using the digital tools. We've got structured questionnaires that can be built, scoring mechanisms, and you can use them time and time again, but make small changes based on the specific procurement that you're doing. And then touching on what Darren mentioned there, within the contract management side of things, you're able to link those KPIs to ensure that the successful bidder is delivering on the outcomes that they said they were going to.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much, Mark. Right, so we have two fantastic suppliers on the panel, and I want to hear a bit more from them. So Priya, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. So how is your organisation, Accenture, how are you responding to contracting authorities and what they're looking for in terms of social value outcomes since the shift in the Procurement Act, but also if you've got any live projects from before where you have got social value being a requirement as part of the projects?
Yeah, so let's kind of throw it back pre-Procurement Act and even pre-social value model. So corporate citizenship, social impact, responsible business has kind of been core to Accenture's DNA for a very long time. And I think the social value model, social value act, and then now the Procurement Act it's brought a bit more rigor and intent. So we're definitely factoring it into commercial decisions and the impacts that that's going to have kind of bid to bid, but also at a higher corporate level. We're aligning to different government priorities. So there's the push around social mobility, boosting digital skills, eliminating kind of digital exclusion, bless you, and yeah, focusing on AI skills as well. And then it's also made us think about the metrics and the KPIs and how are we actually monitoring that impact. So I noted down 3 things that we've done that it's changed the way that we're kind of approaching public sector procurement. Firstly, it's encouraged us to draw on the strengths of different organisations that we're partnering with. Sometimes they're our competitors. That's okay when we're bidding together with them. And also boost our VCSE network, so that collaboration string kind of coming all the way through there. Our VCSEs are genuinely the backbone to us delivering targeted and localised impact. I will shout out Startup Sherpas are one of our VCSE partners, and they're nominated for an award tonight. So when they are on stage, you could give them a big whoop, that'd be great. But yeah, they're absolutely brilliant, and they've enabled us to really scale the impact that we're having on young people from like disadvantaged backgrounds, which Accenture is a large company. We don't have that very targeted, localized understanding and impact. We really, really do lean on those charities and social enterprises to enable us to do that. And alongside the Procurement Act, there's also the boost around SME, VCSE spend. So yeah, it really does enable us and encourage us to boost our VCSE network. And then it's also encouraged us to think outside the box. So what are we doing already that we can tailor and we can align with wider government priorities? So if we're supporting care leavers, how can we adapt our existing digital skills program, our employability programs to really hone in and focus on those more vulnerable groups? And also, cross-industry collaboration. So we are working closely with our other kind of large tech partners. I don't know if AWS are in the room, but just a recent example that's in my mind. We're kind of working with them to, just bring those strengths, bring that outreach that we have across the board together and see how we can scale our impact, what more can we do.
Perfect, thank you very much. And I think a little bit of a throwback to the first panel that we had this morning, that point around collaboration, it being able to drive more work locally with voluntary sector, but also with competitors and that hyper-local approach as big companies needing to look at how do we get a lens on those local communities. So that's really good to hear. Okay, brilliant. Right, so Jo, you've talked already about having a dedicated social impact team, and obviously as Balfour Beatty, you're involved in some major government projects at the moment. So what have been some of your practical approaches as a business to delivering some of these social value outcomes you're being asked for?
Well, it does start with our procurement team and the way that we are embedded with what they are doing, the way that they're constructing their tenders, etc. So it does, and I think this for us was one of the real welcome pieces of the Procurement Act was we have this thing in the business where we talk a lot about shifting left. So whether whether it's to do with design, whether it's to do with an environmental matter or social matter, the further that we can start on the left, right at the beginning of the conversations with the client, at the tender stages, with our supporting enabling functions, then what we can do is we can set up the delivery of that asset in the right way. It always becomes quite challenging when we're a little bit late to the party, which I think historically the sustainability agenda is often a little bit late to the party. It's sort of it's not considered front and center. So the fact that the Procurement Act has shifted everything left has been really helpful. Yeah. What we talk a lot about actually in our team that lead on responsible sourcing, and Darren, I think this is something that you touched on as well, the need to have the social value considerations embedded throughout what we call the procurement value chain. So it's not just at the point of putting out your tender and your signal to the market saying, right, this is what we want to see from our suppliers. It's also then following that through in terms of the KPIs that you're measuring them against. You talked about, seeing what is on the ground, challenging, can we do better, all the way through. And that's something that we are getting better at. We're not perfect at it yet. We do have the challenge of some of our legacy digital systems not quite being as aligned to what we're trying to achieve as we need them to be, but we've been investing with our digital partners to improve those tools. And I think a lot of corporates do struggle with that. We've got legacy technology that is so embedded in the business that you could never remove it, but it isn't easy to pivot it quickly. You have to take the time to invest in it. And then with the team on the ground, for us, procurement practices in our procurement team are a linchpin, are a critically important linchpin in the delivery of social impact, because they send that signal to the market, to our supply chain, that indicates what is important to us. But they cannot deliver it on their own. And I think this is something that we've got to be very cognizant of. Social impact that is long-lasting is delivered by people and the relationships that they hold with local community members and local organisations. And that is where our social impact team comes in. And for Balfour Beatty, we structure our operations in the UK across 5 regions. And we have a regional team for each of those areas, because what we deliver, it must be place-based and purpose-led. Because what one region needs in terms of closing that economic divide, raising up areas of social deprivation, is not necessarily what another area needs. So you can't take this blanket approach. You've got to have that bespoke nature. And I think one of the challenges, though, that we are seeing, and I suppose it is the elephant in the room that we do need to acknowledge, the signal of intent from the Procurement Act, brilliant. But we have, and particularly the shift from tenders focusing on, I think the acronyms are MEET to MAT, so most economically advantageous to just most advantageous. That does require central and local government to have money. Mm-hmm. And our central and local governments are largely broke. Mm-hmm. And we do need to acknowledge this. And so when we do come to these conversations of these are all things that we would love to do for this area, these are all things that we can do for this area, cost and the race to the bottom on price is still there. And we need to have the enablers coming from government, the funding coming from government, to also allow local authorities to do what is on their wish list. Because the Procurement Act, it is that really important signal, it's that stepping stone, but the follow through is not 100% there yet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and the challenge of budgets unfortunately seems to always be around, but increasingly so at the moment, which is restricting.
Well, and I think it's particularly poignant at the moment because of the political landscape that we're leaning into, not just in the UK, but also across Europe and the US as well. We have this rise of protectionism, protectionist policies that are only going to increase the gap between the haves and the have-nots. It's going to drive poverty, not the other way around. And so the need for organizations to drive social initiatives has never been and is never going to be more important. Yeah. So we've got to address this problem of the money needs to flow in order to enable these policies.
Yeah, and I guess from a local point of view, obviously, Jen, you're involved more within the local government response to the Procurement Act. So how are you seeing some of these local challenges of reducing budgets and, if you like, how they're then shifting a focus onto social value, and any examples of how people are translating that into real action locally, or maybe what they're doing when they are faced with some of those challenges through some of the engagement that you're doing with local government?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we have obviously been focusing on embedding the Procurement Act, and as you mentioned earlier, it's a real step change in terms of sort of promoting the social value aspects and aligning to the government missions. I think in terms of the responses that we're seeing from a local perspective, I wonder, Darren, whether you might be better placed to fill in some of those examples. But certainly, I think we are in those early stages of the Procurement Act being embedded. We are seeing a lot more of that market engagement, the preliminary market engagement steps, where authorities are really working to try and better understand user need and to incorporate that into the design of their procurements. But I think, as we said earlier, it's quite an early stage to be seeing some of the examples at the centre. I don't know, Darren, if you've got any sort of...
Yeah, I think you've raised a really important point, and I've been in the local government game quite some time, and I remember back in, I think, 2010, 11, Tina, maybe was it, when we got a 40% in-year budget reduction from Treasury and local government, and without getting into politics, the North East, when the North was disproportionately affected more than the South. What that led to was social value wasn't just a nice thing to do, it became essential. And as procurement people, our job, with the limited budgets, and it is what it is, and at the end of the day, we're all at the behest of the government and the funding that they provide for whatever they decide are the key priorities for the UK. Our job is to maximise the value of every single pound that we spend. And that's our job, right? We can't control the budgets in terms of what's coming down, but what we can do is have the biggest impact. And you saw some of the figures this morning, I think, at the upper quartile, people are delivering 41% extra value, 41 pence for every pound. So despite those difficult budgetary challenges, we have a real opportunity to make a difference. And I'm going to reflect on something. I was on a panel yesterday, right? And I'm not normally an emotional guy, but I nearly cried, and I was the chair, right? Listen to this, right? You think you know stuff, but then you realise you don't know stuff, right? 4.5 million kids live in poverty, right? And something like 72% of those people, and that's 31% of children, by the way, 31% of children live in poverty, and 72% of those come from working families. So they're not people who are unemployed or, not in education and training and so on. So we've got some real issues, and I'm a simple lad, and my dad always used to say to me, whenever I was confused about which way to go, and he always used to say this thing, just fish where the fish are. I said, what does that mean? And it's sort of like, go where the action is, basically. Now, when I was in Durham, I did a hell of a lot of good things with schools. But if you reflect on that child poverty thing, and you want a return on your investment, that sounds a bit harsh when I'm talking about social value in children, there is no better place to deliver your social value than in primary schools. Those kids are the people of tomorrow, the leaders of tomorrow, who may be able to lead. And I've listened the last day or so, and social values like about this project and delivering that tomorrow, and aren't I great, and haven't we done wonderful things? People are now starting to talk, and it was really refreshing again to hear it this morning, about multi-generation, intergeneration impact, and people are looking further. So I think if I had my time again, and my successor Sarah's in the audience here actually now, I think if funds were limited, if resources are limited, even if it made me unpopular with the wider community, I would do everything I could to put value, training, education into primary schools to help young people, because that's where the benefits are. And from my experience on the ground, that makes an impact. And that can be things, simple things like, I've used this example for years, but contract with Lloyds Bank, getting Lloyds Bank to go into a school to teach kids about money matters, a primary school meals contract for 240 schools, getting the primary school meal supplier after school to do fun to cook sessions with children and their carers or parents, because there's a significant amount of people who don't know how to cook from fresh. I'm one of them. But if you're teaching kids to cook in an environment with their parents and carers, you're also teaching the parents and carers, you teach about food nutrition. So I think it's too early to say what will happen and what's going on, but I think things all go really well. But I would call out child poverty as something really that we need to tackle, and social value in schools through the Procurement Act gives us that opportunity. Sorry if I've ranted, but
No,
I nearly cried
rant.
yesterday when I was on my panel. Seriously, it was like eye-opening.
Yeah, and I think there's some really good examples of small steps that you're asking for that actually could make a huge difference to a very local school community. But when you think about the opportunity that procurement teams have across cities, districts, counties, you have got that opportunity to have those small steps across several contracts.
And
Joe, you look like you're going to say something. Jump in, please.
Yeah, no, and I think this is where it's so important to have those social impact teams working very closely with procurement. I mean, so, you know, I could not agree more with what you said, Darren. And, you know, we've got a target of achieving 60,000 hours of schools engagement by the time we get to 2030, because you know, today the biggest barrier to the construction industry's growth is not the lack of work. We've got more work coming at us than we know what to do. We simply don't have the workforce.
Yeah.
And there is, you know, we did you know, because you talk about, you know, engagement with children in terms of the poverty angle, it's also critically important in terms of raising a child's expectations and understanding as to what they can be when they grow up. And, you know, we did a fascinating piece of research in Scotland, engaging with a research partner that identified that by the age of 5, a young girl knows that she can be a teacher or a nurse, and a young boy knows that he can be an astronaut or a doctor. And you know, one example that we've got that's, you know, really close to my heart in our team is our a phenomenally talented young lady on our team who leads our social impact agenda. You know, she was born on a council estate, and the reason why she is in this industry and working for Balfour Beatty is because one person showed up at a careers day in her school and raised her expectations. She talks about it in terms of it was how it was a light bulb going off, showed her what she could be when she was growing up. And of course, she didn't have those role models around her just because of her circumstances that she was born into. So it is absolutely critically important. And this is where our social impact team on the ground, while we talk about place-based, purpose-led, are going into these academic institutions and engaging actively with kids to raise their understanding and their expectations of what they can be, and then a bit like the procurement value chain, following them through, because you can't just engage with them at primary. You've got to engage with them all the way through their education and turn it into work experience opportunities, apprenticeships opportunities, grads opportunities, employment. Yeah. It can't just be that one touch that we do to tick a box. Yeah. Congrats, we've engaged, we've got our social impact for that. We must follow that thread through in order that we take a truly strategic and long-term 25-year view on how we're going to pull these individuals out of poverty and into employment, particularly in industries like construction, where we are so desperate for people.
Especially women as well.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And I would say, in one of my many hats, I'm a trustee for a schools trust. If you haven't volunteered to go and talk to a school, have a conversation about a career pathway, your local school will be screaming out for you. So if you think, oh, that's a good idea, just ring up your local head teacher. They will absolutely have you in. So yeah, that's absolutely a first step that I think everyone could take. Right, we're going to throw to questions. And whilst you raise your hands and we sort out microphones, I have got one from our internet audience. So I'm going to target this one. I say target again, it sounds mean, doesn't it? I'm going to have a look at Mark and bring you back into the conversation, if that's okay. Yep. So our question from Anonymous online is, there still seems to be a lot of duplication in ITT compliance questions. Hang on, that's not the one I was going to ask. I'm moving on to the next one. The next one I was going to ask was, social value delivery sometimes slips during contract management, both by suppliers but also by commissioners. How can this be addressed to ensure that social value is accountable and aligned with PPN notices, Social Value Act, etc.?
Yep. So I think again, just going back to the digital capability that we offer, the contract management side of things allows for performance areas to be set up where you're able to set your KPI indicators, obviously social value being a big part of that, along with anything else that you're measuring against the contract. You're then able to link those KPIs to the contract record. You're able to follow it through time. So obviously not just at the time of the award, what did they say they were going to do? You're actually being able to evaluate against the deliverables that they've advised that they would do. You can then, like I say, look through time, how they've performed, whether it's monthly, quarterly, annually, throughout the contract, and then obviously use that when you're engaging with the suppliers. Yeah. How are they performing? Are they falling short? Have they delivered on what they said they were going to do? By having that all within the system, it allows you just an easy tool to get that visualization on the performance, and then obviously feed that back.
Right. Just jump in there. I think what we've seen from a supplier perspective is there's a lot of scrutiny on the numbers and the quantity, as opposed to the quality that we're having at an individual level or the impact we're actually having within communities. So, what would be really great from a supplier perspective is having more collaboration and more discussions around, hang on, we've got this KPI that was set 3 years ago, we're continuing to deliver on it, but where are we following up? Have we actually just ticked a box, delivered a school session to 25 kids, and now we're just continuing to deliver more sessions to more children? Like, what was the impact of those individuals? And I think a bit more flexibility and a bit more rigor and collaboration around just addressing those KPIs. Are they actually still having an impact? Are they actually still relevant? That would be really great to see more of that.
I think this is hopefully where the Procurement Act will help, because there is a lot more scrutiny on the KPI and the performance element of things. So it does allow for things like that to be followed up throughout the duration of the contract. And then it's all about communicating that back and actually sharing, the learnings and the experience that's obviously came up.
Yeah, and I guess it does also come back to the contracting authority's resource to allocate to that, and making sure that person is skilled, capable, and is informed with the right information to have the right discussions at that point, and I guess is given the flexibility to shift and change and move and pivot if required. Okay, right, I have a lady in a blue top right here who I can see. Are we all right to bring a mic down, please? Just conscious people online, I don't think they can pick up unless we're on mics.
We've got a few more. We've got one over there and a couple over here.
I'll send them running over there as well next. Super, thank you. Hello, lady in the blue top.
Hello. Thank you very much. It's been very interesting, actually. My question is following on a bit from what Priya said and originally from what Jen said. So it's around this issue. I totally agree. Much more learning's happening from what you've done with all the people working on the procurement side. But we've got to a point where we went to the meet and engagement sessions, we've pulled together a really great social value response, we've won the contract, and we've got multiple KPIs which we're then delivering on. And then we're told, actually, the Cabinet Office only wants one KPI that's wrapped up. Now, I haven't built the response to do that. They want that KPI that we can then report on quarterly. I don't have a KPI that I report on every single quarter because I was so specific. I really listened to what was wanted, and then no one knows the answer or how to deal with it. And when I say go back to your networks, you talked to Jen about there's all these networks, there's these working lunches where they can talk about it. None of my people, and I run over 20 government contracts, huge, substantial ones, they don't know who these people are. They're not part of these networks. And we just keep going round and round in circles. And totally agree with you, Priya. We try and have the conversation about, okay, well, shall we reevaluate? Should we have a discussion about changing what this is or how that KPI works? And then they're like, no, you can't make a change. This is what we've contractually agreed to. That will mean a huge contract change. And it's taken me 9 months to change one because my provider changed. So how do we get around that, Jen? Like, what is this issue about we can only wrap it up now into one KPI when the question was not that at all, when we were told to have more than one outcome, and yet that's not being taken into consideration?
Sorry, whereabouts are you from?
So I work for Cognizant. We're an IT company.
And you've got a contract with a central government contract, and this is one you're currently delivering on? Or
It's
one
all of them. I'm with HMRC, DEFRA, MOD, DFE. I've got multiple, MOJ. I have the same problem with all of them.
And did you say there's difficulty engaging with networks, with finding out who they...
It's when we
sorry,
have
this
the-
sounds a bit
Yeah,
tricky.
sorry, we are
Can't
struggling
really-
to hear you up here.
Sorry. So it's when we come to, right, we have delivered on this contract, these multiple KPIs. They want us to distill the multiple KPI into one KPI that will go to Cabinet Office, that I can report on quarterly, and that will have a change quarterly. But I can't, they don't match, like they asked us different max. I can't distill it down to one KPI.
Yeah, I think if it's all right, perhaps we can have a quick chat after this session so I can better understand the context of that and make sure
And
I
then
can help you
the
more.
second bit is these networks of social value people. Do you release a list? Because all the people I work with don't know who those designated people are that they could go and ask for that advice from.
Yeah, so we have a social value team at Cabinet Office who manage that network. So I can certainly sort of look to link up and find some contacts for you to help there. So yeah, no problem.
That's brilliant.
Thanks, Jen. And that might be something good to share with the social value portal team, so that can be shared with others in the room, because I think that's a valuable resource that obviously we all need to go about. I'm going to send you running over the other side of the room, if that's okay. Lady in the white T-shirt who's had her arm up for ages and is waving. I have got a 5-minute warning, so if I can get your question, and we'll answer it, and then, oh God, I'm going to go down the front to this lady here, and everyone else, I'm really sorry. I promise I tried to keep enough time ready.
We'll be super, super quick then. So I really loved all the discussion about intergenerational impact, and that's something that we have been speaking to our clients about. One of the things that we come up against, and it's this part as well as the making it local that they come across, is the part of the question that speaks to during the lifetime of the contract. So we're trying to get people, trying to get clients to think about how do we push that impact out over multiple years. But we get back, but the contract's 5 years, and I don't want to put all of that eggs in one basket because I'll be answering different questions in different places for different sets of 5 years all over the country. And that's really hampering it, which leads to the second point of the question, which is, again, when we talk about being local, whilst having a standardised question is great in terms of helping people to understand what they need to answer, I feel sometimes it really hinders the ability to innovate. And I would be interested to hear from those on the procurement side of the panel how they feel about people making tweaks and changes, small ones, to that question in order to get what they actually need out of it. And then the final bit is just in regards to what you said about children. We were having this discussion this morning, so it was just a really quick one for the room, is I asked my 8-year-old and my 5-year-old yesterday what they want to be when they grow up. And actually what you said on the stage wasn't necessarily the problem. The problem was we talk down to kids. So when they said, well, I said, what does daddy do? He's a specialist weapons expert for the MOD. And I said that, and he went, oh, they won't understand that. Just say teacher or soldier. And then when they said, what do I do? I said, well, ask Daddy, what do I do? We gave the same thing. I write tenders, I write fundraising bids, I run innovation sessions. Oh, they won't understand that. Tell them you're a writer. If we keep talking down to kids, they're never going to get all of the jobs that we do in this room.
Thank you. Right, so first part of that question, Joe, I wonder if you can pick that up in terms of how do you respond locally when we are being asked different things, and that long-term response. I assume you've got quite a lot of overlapping contracts that you're having to deliver social value on. So how do you manage that from your
so each of our regional areas, we have our strategic priorities for those areas. And one of the things that we are doing as Balfour Beatty, we are the largest principal contractor. And so we're using our size and clout as a business to send that signal to the rest of the industry saying, this is what we're doing and we really want you to come with us. A lot of what we build in terms of our major infrastructure, it's all a JV. We're normally working with other entities. We've got good relationships with organisations on the ground as well as our other construction partners. And it is about trying to send that consistent message to local areas saying, this is the list, this is the one thing you're going to be asked for. We do have an issue in construction where not just social, but sustainability credentials are in a competitive space. We compete on them, which means that when we come to tender time, people don't want to put the same thing in each tender. You want to distinguish yourself against your competitors. Now, healthy competition is great, but what we do have to be really careful of, and we are falling into this trap culturally in the industry, is if we are just competing and going toe-to-toe on anything to do with sustainability, then we are going to overwhelm the supply chain with a list of different asks, because no one's going to want to do the same thing, and we are going to overwhelm local areas. So and I know that we've spoken about collaboration, this is where collaboration is so important, and it moving beyond just being something that we endlessly talk about to things that we actually use our procurement tools in order to unite on. We all share the same supply chain in our industry, whether it's major infrastructure or the housing build sector, we share the same supply chain. So we do need to be sending consistent messages. Otherwise, it will be overwhelming for everyone.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to hold the second parts of your question, if that's all right. And I would say anyone that does have a question, who does want to ask the panel, we are around after this, so please grab people. Final question, lady at the front. Can I just have a mic down the front, please? And we'll take that as the final question, because I'm going to get kicked out in about 30.
You've fallen into the Shah Begum trap.
Yeah, oh God.
You're going to get a difficult question.
Oh, I hope she targets it for you. There we go. We'll finish on a challenging one. We'll take it.
For Darren.
It's not actually a question. I've just got a couple of observations on some of the things that you've said. Joanna, you were talking about role models, and the lady over there was talking about kind of like role models. I just want to say that if you're somebody that looks and sounds like me, you have fewer role models. Very few role models. So I would say that anybody that is going out and doing schools engagement, community engagement, to the extent possible, please think about who is doing that talking. Who are the representatives that you're putting in front of young people that look like me? Are there visibly disabled people? Are there people that wear a hijab? Are there people that wear turbans in your workforce that could be encouraged into your outreach and community engagement teams and skilled and things like that? Okay? Absolutely. If you only ever get one homogenous type person coming in and telling you about jobs, that's great. Okay, but if they never look like you and you think, well, nobody wearing a hijab is ever going to drive a train. Because I've never seen anybody in a hijab drive a train. That's all you're going to think. And then kind of Mark, you talked about kind of KPIs and having a really clear tracking system.
Yeah.
I do think some local authorities are there, some are better than others. They have this really clear tracking system. Where the gap is nobody seems to have decided what happens if you don't deliver.
Yeah.
Nobody has a contractual penalty policy. Nobody has any discussions around, okay, well, if they've, delivered all of our school meals contracts on time, in budget, done a fantastic job, but they've just totally sliced out the social value commitments. What happens? What's the consequence? What do you do about that? And then Priya, you made a very lovely kind of like statement about you've done some really great work during the lifetime of this contract, and I think the lady over there did as well. What happens next? What about that longitudinal impact? I do think there is a case for local authorities to consider whether, if an incumbent person is tendering for a repeat or an extension of their contract, whether or not you would consider kind of longitudinally extending the commitments that they have already delivered to be an adequate answer in a tender question, or perhaps saying, Accenture have done this really great grounding work. We're not going to reappoint them. Hopefully that's not going to happen, Priya, but we're not going to reappoint them, but we want you to own the longitudinal tracking of that and build on that. And I think that that's an approach that local authorities, given time, space and training, should be encouraged to look at, so that something isn't just parachuted in and just at the point it's starting to get good impact and tell a good story, it's dropped because the supplier has changed.
Yeah.
So,
great.
So hopefully it's not a difficult question, but I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, please.
Can I respond on?
You can, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds because I'm going to get.
How many? 30 seconds. Right. This session is about delivering social value through better procurement. So I think what Shah's mentioned is really important. And if you're going to you're going to step to the left, isn't that a Rocky Horror thing? No, if you're going, if you're going to step to the left and do that early engagement, if you're going to get all those commitments, you've got a contract for it, and there needs to be a consequence. And what's really interesting, when I was in Durham, I put in, I don't want to use the word liquidated damages because that's not the right term, but we put consequences in of not delivering. And I remember the first time we did it, and the supplier said, God, you really mean this, don't you? And we're going to hold you to account. And so the putting that contractual term in is really important and following it through. And in my time, in the last 7 years in Durham, with having that term in, never once did I have to play a financial penalty card, because contract management impacted well, discussions happened, situations changed, we traded and negotiated on things, so I think that's the solution. And sorry, to the ladies who doesn't like the questions from procurement people, I'm going to defend my procurement community. Preliminary market engagement is a two-way street. It's a team game. You're having experience of poor practice on KPI management or standard questions. Go to those preliminary market engagement events and educate the purchaser, the buyer, the procurer, because you have a right to. And also, as clever as procurement officer people are, they don't know everything about every project, every category all the time. So take that opportunity you've got now to influence things. And the final comment, sorry, it's over 30 seconds, to Shah's point, KPI performance and reporting and transparency is important. And going forward, we can use performance information to exclude people from tendering much stronger than we ever could before. If someone's doing a good job, tell everybody. Yeah. If someone's doing a bad job, tell everybody and their friends.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. Right, so I'm just going to summarise very quickly, because I'm definitely going to get marched off this stage very soon. So firstly, I think what we've heard is early days. As Darren said, educate the procurement people, educate on those supply days, get involved with that market engagement. Ultimately, you have the expertise, and your procurement people don't always. So I think there's definitely some key lessons there. We know that intergenerational impact is going to be key, and that early engagement piece and that early intervention is a really key place where social value and social value impact can make a difference. And I think finally, Darren's point again, I don't like keep referring to you and saying you're saying good things, but it's that contract, it's that accountability, it's having teeth with those tools that we've got. So really encouraging the buyers in the room to use that, because we will see a difference as a result. So finally, big thank you to my panel of Jen, Mark, Priya, Jo, Darren. Big round of applause, please. I think it's lunchtime.
Hostess with the most.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.